everyone. My name is Summer. I'm the training lead here at ProcessMaker. I'm going to wait about 2 more minutes for any latecomers to arrive, and then I'm going to go ahead and get started. So please just hang on for about 2 more minutes, and then I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you. All right, I am going to go ahead and get started. So again, my name is Summer. I'm the training lead here at ProcessMaker, and I'm going to take over today's session. So what we're going to do today is continue where Giovanni left off last week. So in last week's session, Giovanni walked through creating a leave of absence form, I believe, in his own screen, and just taught you how to build a form or a form type screen using the controls we have over here in this left menu. And what I'm going to do today is just show you how to work with calculated properties and CSS in your form to change some of the functionality, provide more advanced options, as well as change the look and feel of your screens. So here I am. I've already got the leave of absence request form built. So here I am in the screen designer. And then so in the case you weren't here for last week's session, this is our screen designer. I have about three main panels to look at here. So I've got this left-hand side where I have all of my controls. All I need to do is simply drag and drop them onto the form design to add them to my form. Then here I've got the actual design of my form. So if I look here, I've got my leave of absence request form. I've got the title here. This is a rich text control that I've used to create the subtitle, as well as the title here. I've got this current date field, and I'm going to come back to this in just a second. I've got a place where the employees can fill out their details, and then I've got a place where the employees can fill out their leave details as well. And then finally, a place to submit any files that they need, like a doctor's note, and then a submit button. So there are a few fields I want to point out. So when I go up here, I want to come back to this current date field here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to find a way to auto-populate this field with the current date. This is a very popular request that we get during trainings, and in ProcessMaker 4, they've made it pretty simple to do this. If you're familiar with ProcessMaker 3, sorry, I'm trying to do full screen here. All right, here we go. If you remember from ProcessMaker 3, you used to have to do a trigger to get the date using the PHP date function, but here we can build this functionality directly into the screen, and this works very different from ProcessMaker 3, and you'll see in just a second. Another thing that I want to do, which is another popular request we always get in training, is autofill these fields with the current users, the current assigned users, name, title. I left email blank, but you can also do email as well. And I'll show you how to do that. And this is a pretty simple thing to do as well. Then here I also am going to calculate the leave total based on the values entered into the leave start and leave end fields. And that's pretty much it. And then finally, I'll show you how to use CSS to change the look and feel of this form. So now let me go ahead and teach you how to populate this current date field using JavaScript in a computed property. So to access my computed properties, I'm going to go ahead and go to the upper right-hand corner of the screen designer and then click this Calcs button here. And then this is how I can access my calculated or computed properties. Now you see here I've already got all of these properties that I have, so I'm going to just show you how I did this. So to add a new property, you can click Add Property here, and then it takes you to this screen. But I'm going to go ahead and edit this current one, and they'll take me to the same screen anyway. So here we've got 3 fields. So we've got property name, which here is current date, and this is very important. A description, which just lets me know what this computed property does. And then here I've got the formula. So for the formula, you could either use a very basic mathematical formula, or you can use JavaScript. So here I used JavaScript, so you can see my JavaScript here. So first of all, let me come back to this property name, current date. So basically what computed properties do is they allow you to compute the value of one of the variables in your screen. So this one calculates the current date variable. So let me go ahead and save this. And so if I go ahead and I click on my current date field here, its configuration comes up in this right panel over here. So you can see I've got this variable section at the top, and the first field is key name. So we see that the key name of the variable attached to this current date control is current date. So this is the property that I'm going to use in the calculated property to calculate current date with JavaScript. Because you can see here we've got property name. So the property name has to come from the key name of the variable you want to auto-populate. And if you don't have that exactly the same, then nothing is going to happen. So you've got to make sure that the key name is the same as the variable, or same as the name of the property here, excuse me. So here I've got current date as the property name, and then I've got my formula down here. So here it's just, I'm returning a new date, and then I'm putting it into JSON format with that function, limiting the size of it because it also returns the time as well, and I just wanted the date. And then I replace my slashes with dashes with slashes here. And this is all pretty basic JavaScript. If you're familiar with coding, it shouldn't be too difficult. So now I've got my current date, I've got my formula working properly. So if I save it and I've got everything correct, I can actually go into the preview of my screen to see it working properly. So here it's auto-populating the current date. And so the next thing I want to show you, and this doesn't really come across well in the preview, is how to define autofill these fields using values in the user profile of the assigned user to the task. So let me go back into the design. And so what I'm going to do here is autofill this employee name and title fields. So again, I'm going to take note of the key name of the variable. So here I've got the key name is employee name for the employee name field, and I've got employee title here as the key name for this employee title field. So I'm going to go into calculated properties here, and then I'm going to go ahead and look at the employee name and employee title properties. So here again, I've got property name, so that's employee name, the same key name as the employee name variable. My description, which is not completely necessary, but the formula here is what I care about. So this time I didn't need to use JavaScript. I just used this simple formula here, which allows me to also perform simple mathematical calculations as well. But here, all I needed to do was enter this variable here. So in ProcessMaker 4, we have a thing we've called magic variables, but basically they're universal variables for the system. So here we've got 2 magic variables. One is user and one is request. So in this case, I was autofilling the employee name field. So in this case, I use the full name property of the user variable to return the name of the employee. So let me actually show you where to find these magic variables in our documentation. So let me just zoom out for a second and open our documentation. And then I'm going to go ahead and search. So this is our user documentation. It's just processmaker.gitbook.io/processmaker. And you can also access it from within the user interface as well. But let me go ahead and search this. So I am going to search for magic variables. And so here we've got two. We've got the _user magic variable, which, as we read here, it contains data about the current ProcessMaker user assigned to a task element or a manual task element. So here it just tells me all of the different information that we can pull about that user using this magic variable here. And so you can see here, if I can find it in the list, that I use this user.fullname variable to return the full name of the ProcessMaker user assigned to the task. We also have a second one that returns basic information about the current request running. So we can return the ID using the magic variable, the name of the request process associated with the request, and all of this information. So if you simply go to our documentation and search for magic variables, this page is going to come up. So again, I've used that user.fullname magic variable in my calculated property to return the user's full name. And I also just quickly want to show you from where it pulls this information. So it just pulls that information from the user profile. So if I actually look here, it's going to pull the first and last name admin, as well as the title nutritionist. So we've got that. And then just for the second one, for the title, I've used user.title, but it basically does the same thing. So let me go ahead and save this. Now, if I look in the preview here, we can see that it's not properly autofilled just because it only that user variable only pulls information about the user that's assigned to a task. And obviously we're not here with a task yet, we're just in the screen preview. However, if I open a request and I go to the leave of absence request form here, and then I go here, then we can see all of that information properly filled in, because now we finally have a person who is assigned to this task in a process. We've also got the current date as well. All right. So let me go back into the screen designer. And I saw your question, but let me get back to it after this explanation. Sorry about that. I did want to show you one more thing. So let me go back into the designer and I'll go back into screens. And then back into my leave request form. All right, and I'm here now. So the last thing I wanted to do was calculate this leave total field. And so all I did that, again, I'm looking at the key name, leave total. Oops, wrong one. I'm going to look at the calculated properties for the leave total. And then this simply was JavaScript here. So again, I use JavaScript to make this calculation. But the thing that I want to point out is the way that you refer to data entered into the current screen being filled out. And that using JavaScript, you do this dot the variable name that you want to make the calculation with. So that's basically the important thing. And then finally at the bottom, I've got the days plus 1. So because we're not just calculating the time between 2 days, because normally when you ask for leave, you also intend to take the days off from the very beginning. So I've had to return days plus 1. But again, the important thing here is just to remember that if you want to refer to data that was previously entered into the form, you just use this dot that key name there. So let me just see how this works in the preview. And then we've got that leave total automatically calculated. And that's all I really have to show about computed properties. Obviously, if you're very good with JavaScript, there's a whole lot of things you can do. I just showed you some very basic but common examples here. Now in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to cover CSS. There's really not much to using CSS in a screen. So here, if right next to that calculated properties button, I've got the custom CSS button here. All right, so here I've got this CSS, and I'm going to walk you through it in a second. Actually, let me reorder this. So it's in the way I want to explain. So this first thing, if you're familiar with CSS at all, hopefully this won't be too confusing, but this first thing I'm referring to here is an element. So basically what we have is a CSS selector name for each control in the case you want to manipulate just that control using CSS. So if I actually exit out of that, and so, well, first of all, let me just show you. So we've got this selector. Should have saved that. We have this selector, and the name of that selector is radio. Sorry about that. There we go. All right, so we have that selector named radio. So if I actually look at my radio button control here, I'm no longer in that variable panel anymore. I'm going to expand this advanced panel down here. We've got this thing called CSS selector name. So this CSS selector name allows you to easily refer to any of these controls in order to manipulate the styling of that particular control. So in that case, I use the radio CSS selector name to change the appearance of this radio button control. So now let me go ahead back into the CSS. And so we can see here, I'm going to try to make the buttons display inline. So that means instead of having them be displayed vertically, I want them to display horizontally, which is a common request we've gotten in the past in ProcessMaker 3. So let me go ahead and save that. And if I go into the preview, we can see here that this is displayed horizontally rather than vertically. And actually, to make this more clear, let me take this out of that table there. And so now we can see it is perfectly horizontal this way. So let's see what else we can do with CSS. So I've got that displayed inline. And now we can also use like the regular class names as well in order to manipulate the CSS of the screen. So if we actually look at the bottom, and I've got this label here, so actually let me move this a second. So we got this label here, and this is going to refer to every single label on the form. So I just wanted to make every single label bold. So let me go ahead and save that. If I go into the preview, we can see that all of these labels are bolded here. Which is, I actually do prefer the look of this. But if we actually see what it looks like normally, I can quick change that to normal and go back into the preview, and we can see the change there. But you could see that it changed all of the labels of these controls. And let me change that back to bold. And then the last thing I did want to show you is how to refer to the entire screen as a whole. So what I did to manipulate the background color of the whole screen was I used this div page. So here I'm referring to the whole page, aka screen. And then here I've changed the background color to gray. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then if I go into the preview, everything is gray. And then you can pick any color as long as you have the hex code. I just picked gray because it was the first thing to come to mind. And that's really all there is to calculated properties and CSS. This, again, is a very basic example of CSS. Some other things you can do perhaps is to change the input of the control to all uppercase, for example, rather than lowercase, which is the default. We can change the logo. We could put a logo in the form as well. If you know your way around CSS, or you're cool with looking at some online tutorials, whatever you can do to the screen as well. So now that's the end of the tutorial I had about computed properties and CSS for screens. At this point, you can go ahead and ask any questions, and I'll get back to you. So let me know if you have questions right now, and I'll get to them before we end this session. All right, last call for any questions. Let me know if you have any questions about computed properties, CSS, or any of the materials you've seen so far. All right, I've got a question here. Is there a way to ensure undefined does not show when properties not yet computed? Currently, I do not know of a way off the top of my head. What I would do is maybe autofill some of the properties where the calculation is where you need the calculation. So let's say, you've got leave end and leave start make up the leave total computed property. Something I might do instead would be to autofill the dates first, so that the not a number or undefined doesn't appear. That's one workaround I can think of. Yeah, I'm trying to think of one, or just making sure that there's always some sort of value. Like I would work maybe a condition in JavaScript, like if leave total, or if leave start and leave end equals 0, then leave total equals 0 or something like that. So that's what I would also do in that case, would be to either add a condition to the computed property in case the other values haven't been computed yet, or I would also just make sure that whatever values that the computed property depends on already have a value when you enter the form. And that's something you can also do through computed properties as well. All right, I've got another question here. A common requirement is dependent fields. How are those handled here? So that's the first part of the question. Actually, at this time, there is not a good way to handle dependent fields. What you can do is try to manipulate the visibility properties so that only certain selections appear based on whatever choice is selected. Like let's say you would have, if sales is selected, you would have to have another drop down that would appear based on the fact that sales was selected, or finance, and then different maybe options would appear in another control that's normally hidden, but there's not really a good way to manipulate the options in a control. But that's something that we should be working on and should come out in a future version of 4. And then the second part of that question is, can we use calcs for that, especially when we are doing API calls? You could make an API call from the calculated property doing JavaScript. So maybe, yeah, this is something I have not yet tried. Let me, if you're fine with me emailing you with the email address you submitted to register for this webinar, I can contact you after this with a better answer. But right now, off the top of my head, you could try making an AJAX call through a computed property, although trying to think of what might happen. But that's the first answer that comes off the top of my head. But let me get back to you. All right. Are there any more questions? I'm going to go ahead and give you guys maybe a few more seconds. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and end today's session. And if you still have any more questions as well, feel free to contact us at training@processmaker.com. Again, that's training@processmaker.com. And you can feel free to email us about any of the content we've covered. Okay, I don't believe anyone has any more questions, so thank you very much for your attendance. Next week, we're going to be covering email notifications in ProcessMaker 4, so stay tuned for that. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.